A story that we'd talked about for several months had become reality. A name that had been mentioned and whispered in hushed tones as a player that was going to change teams. The first leg of that happened. Now, if you didn't see and you don't have no idea what we're talking about, what's the riddle? Get to the point, please. All right, so DeAndre Hopkins was fired from his job in the NFL. Now, the NFL doesn't use the word fired when it comes to players.
You're fired.
They say you were released, which is a nice way of saying you were fired. But he was let go from his job with the Arizona Cardinals. It's a softer way to say you got fired when you say you were released. But he was fired. Hopkins spent 3 years in Arizona, 17 touchdown receptions on his resume with the Birds, the desert variety of the Birds. Still had 2 years left on his contract for $34 million. May we all have 2 years left on our contract for $34 million, like DeAndre Hopkins had. So now the question becomes, who's got next? Who's got next? So let us discuss. The way we'll frame it, we'll keep it simple. It's Sports Talk Radio. But the way we're going to frame this is as follows. So where does DeAndre Hopkins end up now that he is free to roam around the NFL country? So I've got Stevie Ray Vaughan, Discotheque, and Irish Spring. And we will combine all of these things together. We'll squish them together, and we are going to make a nice big moving van, which is what DeAndre is going to need as he moves all his crap out of Arizona somewhere else on the NFL circuit. So, number one. There is a limited market for DeAndre Hopkins. Believe it or not. I believe it. I'm the one that just said it. I'll tell you why. All right. He is promoting himself. He's propping himself up. Maybe that's a better way of saying it. As a high-end commodity. But the numbers recently don't back that up. That's a problem. And the whispers around the NFL say that Hopkins only wants to play for a legitimate Super Bowl contender. Well, what if those legitimate Super Bowl contenders do not want DeAndre Hopkins? Then what do? That's a quagmire of a situation. Now, we're not there yet, but nobody else apparently will solve his unquenchable thirst to play for a winning team. Of course, I think that's a lot of malarkey, and that ultimately DeAndre Hopkins will end up going where the money is, assuming all things are equal. If there's a team that is a contender that offers a similar contract, he will go to that team that's better, but it's not like he's going to totally eliminate the teams that are fringe contenders. But we'll talk about what his people have tossed out into the echo chamber, the people who are on Team Hopkins and whatnot. So there are three obvious Super Bowl contenders. If I gave you a list of three teams, then I said you've got to come up with three teams that I can guarantee you are going to be in the conversation for the Super Bowl next time it's being played in Vegas. Those three teams on my big board, not a list because we don't do list radio, but my big board, I've got Kansas City. That's obvious. Buffalo. Here we go, Buffalo. And the Cincinnati Bengals. Those three teams. So those would be the first three teams if this reporting is accurate. DeAndre Hopkins wants to play for a winner and not some team in the outskirts of that. So you go Kansas City, Buffalo, and Cincinnati as the first three teams. But we eliminate the Bengals. They're eliminated because they do not make moves like this. They don't. So you're going to erase them off your big board. And then you're like, well, wait a minute here. It becomes an old Stevie Ray Vaughan song, Love Struck Baby. Right? And you say, okay, terms of contenders, they have a clear need here. The process of elimination, it is the Chiefs all day. That should be where DeAndre Hopkins ends up. If he wants to play for a winner, a team that has a need there. Buffalo, not as much, but Patrick Mahomes is the measuring stick. Do we all agree on that? Mahomes is the measuring stick for quarterbacks right now in that business. He's the top guy of his generation, and Andy Reid is a top 3 coach in the NFL. So there is also a void there when you peruse the roster of the Chiefs, and you're like, wait a minute, where did all the receivers go? I know they won last year without having a top-notch receiver, but the depth chart has Marquez Valdez-Scantling as the number 1 receiver, Kadarius Toney as the number 2, and Sky Moore as number 3 on the list. That's the top 3 receivers right there. Not exactly a murderer's row of pass catchers. And you look across over at Buffalo, well, yeah, they got Josh Allen. He's pretty good, although he's had some hiccups now and again. And then you look at Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis. Both those guys would be number 1 receivers on Kansas City. And also the other problem you get, not that the weather's great in Kansas City late in the year, but in Buffalo, you get anywhere from 2 to 4 lake effect blizzard games where the Bills become a running team, and therefore DeAndre Hopkins would just be out there blocking and would not be part of the offense there because you just don't throw the ball in those nasty, cold, the late-season Bills home games. One of the reasons the Bills offensive players have a huge hill to climb in order to win a most valuable player award. Now, the other team that we're tossing out, this is not a contender. They're not going to win anything, but you toss them out for DeAndre Hopkins as we're playing the speculation game, and that would be Cleveland and the Browns. Now, why the Browns? Because of the creepy quarterback, Deshaun Watson. They played together in Houston, and so that would, of course, be another mistake by the lake, but DeAndre Hopkins could go to Cleveland. He would be the number 1 receiver ahead of Amari Cooper and Donovan Peoples-Jones and ex-Jet Elijah Moore, who are hanging out there in northern Ohio. Now, page 2 here. So why did the Cardinals just get rid of DeAndre Hopkins, release him, rather than trade him, even if it was for a conditional late-round draft pick? Wouldn't you have been better off making the trade? Of course. You don't have to be an executive for an NFL team. The Cardinals would have absolutely been better off if they had made a trade. The short answer is the reason they didn't, they're a bunch of ragamuffins. That's the short answer there. Now, to expand on that, rather than make a lopsided deal that would have been giving up a talent for a low-round draft pick, they made no trade at all. They went to the discotheque, and they did the dance of the clueless, is what the Cardinals did here. Getting something, even if it's not great, is better than nothing, and the Cardinals are spinning this as a victory. Of course they are. Why wouldn't they? That's what all the teams do. Oh, no, everything's great. Oh, we're good. No, not really. Not really, right? I mean, what else did you expect them to do? Say that we lost the transaction, releasing the player. But the naked truth is, and you're not going to get this a lot of places, but DeAndre Hopkins at this point is a C-level player who thinks he's an A-level player. That's a problem, right? That's a problem. Don't let a falling star fall on you. And he's past the age of 30. Check. That's a problem when you get to as a wide receiver. Very rarely do you get top-notch production from a receiver past the age of 30. So declining value on that. And he's also got the stank of a PED cheat. That doesn't really work all that much in football. It's more of a baseball thing, but that's on his resume as well. So you've got injuries. You've got the classical diva wide receiver tendencies. And you do the arithmetic, and 99.9% of receivers have a little diva in them if they're any good. But spoiler alert, even with all that noise, the Cardinals could have still gotten something, and they got nothing. Instead, they're claiming victory because they saved $8 million in salary cap space. But, by the way, they're still going to have a dead salary cap hit of $22.6 million. Now, on this show, we are salary cap truthers on this show. We know the manipulation of the salary cap, that you use it to explain anything. It's the ultimate explanation, the confessional. It's like, well, the reason we got rid of this player is because we couldn't afford him anymore. We blah, blah, blah. If you want to keep someone, if the Cardinals wanted to keep DeAndre Hopkins, we know what they're trying to do. They're trying to suck. But if they wanted to keep him, they could have worked it out. They could have kept him on the roster, but they didn't. The salary cap is a object that is manipulated easily. You can move the numbers around, cook the books. It's like having a good accountant, and these teams all have good accountants. All right, last and final point. So we'll take a couple steps back from DeAndre Hopkins. Does this movement by the Cardinals indicate that Kyler Murray is on thin ice in Arizona? Ding, 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 ding. Yes. Yes, to infinity and beyond. Now, he was on thin ice whether DeAndre Hopkins stayed in Arizona or not, but this furthers along the storyline 1,000%. There is a roadmap, and if you follow the roadmap has Alligator Arms Murray next out of town among the high-profile players in Arizona. With the last one left, turn out the lights, the party's over there. And it makes a lot of sense because when you follow the roadmap, Cardinals get out the old Irish Spring and scrub-a-dub-dub, right? Get that scrub-a-dub-dub soap out and reset the franchise. Murray is out already. He's going to miss part of next season anyway as he's coming off medical procedure there, an ACL, I believe, the injury there. So he might miss the entire year. Colt McCoy is the de facto starter. So you end up in full tanky McTank mode if you're the Cardinals. Arizona is going to win based on what I've read of their roster and this buffoon they hired as a coach. They'll win anywhere from 2 to 4 games. So they'll win 2 to 4 games, and that means that the Cardinals will be in position to have the number 1 overall pick. And they have a great chance, even if they don't get the number 1 pick, to trade up for it because the Cardinals also have the Houston Texans pick. They're going to blow from a trade they made this year as the Texans moved up in the draft. So it's conceivable the Cardinals could have the top 2 picks in next year's NFL draft. And the draftniks already are hyping up generational talents at quarterback in Caleb Williams, the Heisman winner from SC, and Drake May from North Carolina. Those two are the next wave of can't-miss blue-chip NFL suspects or prospects. So Arizona, with 2 shots to get a top 2 pick in the draft and get one of those quarterbacks, and that would mean they would be open for business. Get rid of Alligator Arms Murray. Remember, already the general manager that gave him the contract was fired. How do we know that? He was working for us during the NFL draft. Also, the head coach, Cliff Kingsbury, is now going to college football to coach Caleb Williams. So those guys are gone. And Kyler Murray's passion is video games. It was a terrible contract. The Cardinals knew it was a terrible contract. That's why they put a clause in there saying that you actually have to study. He raised a hullabaloo. The Cardinals caved in. They took the clause out of the contract. And so it's setting up as he's the next to go. And where does he go? The usual suspects. You look at the teams that will be back in the quarterback derby next year. You're looking at the Tennessee Titans, the Atlanta Falcons, the Las Vegas Raiders, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Those are the teams, the Commanders.
The greatness of the Raiders.
Who are all in play for Kyler Murray.